Good to have you join me. Here are news stories from international scenes. UK budget. Today, British Prime Minister looks to save the economy and his seat. Hundreds of thousands in Deluge, California to evacuate. Monastery assault in Myanmar kills 22. Pakistani police fired tear gas into former Prime Minister's home. And North Korea confirms 2 missile launches sales drills designed to annihilate enemy. The spring budget is targeted at hushing UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's critics from within his party, as well as heading off the threat set by the Labour Party going into the next general polls. After a turbulent 6 months as the British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak is stepping up to face his most critical trial by fire, the spring budget. On Wednesday, the so-called budget for growth will be unveiled by the Chancellor of the Treasury, Jeremy Hunt, amidst gloom in the UK economy owing to surging inflation and a cost of living crunch. The last budget, presented in September 2022, was badly accepted royal UK markets and also led to the ouster of then Prime Minister Liz Truss. Sunak naturally is not intent on following the act. Ahead of the budget, Sunak said his government will prioritize decreasing the country's debt over cutting taxes. At 2.5 trillion euros, the UK's debt comes in just under 100% of gross domestic product, GDP, a little above the Eurozone average. With the UK barely avoiding a recession and the newest economy figures giving reason for of 12 new low-tax investment zones to energy bill aid, which was due to come into force next month. With this, government subsidies will keep the average household energy bill covered at an annualized rate of 2,500 euros. Hunt is also likely to extend a decade-long fuel duty freeze. Attempts to encourage the over 50s, the long-term sick and disabled Hunt, according to more reports, Hunt is to raise the so-called lifetime allowance that presently means people incur tax charges if they accumulate over 1 million euros in pension savings. The budget will lay out a 4 billion euros expansion to free childcare for also add funding by 288 million euros by 2024 to 2025 for the existing program of free childcare for 3-year-olds. Hundreds of thousands in flood-ravaged California are without power, and hundreds of people are in shelters as the newest atmospheric river sweeps through the state with fierce hurricane-force winds and drenching San Francisco high-rise building and toppled trees and power lines across the state. On Tuesday, the San Francisco Bay Area's public transit system, known as BART, was also being heavily affected by the storm. Most of our impacts on service have been due to high winds toppling trees and falling branches entering our trackway, back spokeswoman Shirley Starter said, according to report. 97 mph at Santa Clara County's Loma Prieta and California remain under flood alerts as the land, threatening more risky floods and mudslides. California Governor Gavin Newsom expanded the state of emergency to cover 43 of the state's 58 counties Tuesday night as high winds and intense rain wrought havoc in the state. This is the 11th atmospheric river, a long, narrow band of moisture that can carry saturated air thousands of miles like a fire hose to inundate California this winter season, arriving on the heels of another storm that hit central California particularly hard. The National Weather Service warns that the state will get just a few days of relief after the storm tapers off Wednesday before yet another atmospheric river comes next week. Over 71,600 people were under evacuation warnings and closely another 27,000 were under evacuation orders across the state as of Tuesday morning, California Governor's Office of Emergency Services spokesman Gustavo Ortiz said. According to state officials on Tuesday, statewide, hundreds of people were taking refuge in dozens of shelters across multiple counties. Evacuation alerts remain in many counties on Wednesday, including for those near the swollen Salinas and Pajaro rivers in Monterey County. To the south, residents near wildfire-burned cars in Los Angeles County were under evacuation warnings. Now, on Saturday, no less than 22 people, including 3 monks, were killed at a monastery in Myanmar's southern Shan state as local insurgent groups and the military-backed junta accused each other of carrying out a massacre. Myanmar has been stuck in political violence since military leader Min Aung Hlaing seized power in a 2021 coup that overturned any hope the Southeast Asian nation of 55 million people will become a functioning democracy. The coup was followed by a brutal military crackdown against pro-democracy protesters that saw civilians shot in the street, abducted in the nighttime attacks, and allegedly tortured in detention. At least 2,900 people in Myanmar have been killed by junta soldiers and over 17,500 arrested since the coup, the majority of whom are still in detention, according to Advocacy Group Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, AAPP. The coup has also resulted in a rise in fighting between the military and a raft of resistant groups allied with long-established ethnic militias in a country that has been plagued for decades by insurgencies. Resistant groups have continually accused Myanmar's military of carrying out mass killings, airstrikes and war crimes against civilians in the regions where fighting has raged, charges the junta repeatedly denies in spite of an increasing body of evidence. The newest allegation of an atrocity emerged last week in Shan State, the remote and mountainous northeastern chunk of Myanmar that borders China, Laos and Thailand. Pakistani police fired tear gas into the grounds of Imran Khan's Lahore home on Wednesday following a night of violent clashes between security personnel and the ex-Prime Minister's supporters as efforts by offenders in the eastern city, including 34 police officers, a Pakistani police official said according to reports, on condition of anonymity, adding that people inside Khan's residence were armed with gun charges. According to a tweet from Islamabad police, footage shared by Khan's Pakistan Tehreek Insaf PM, the former Prime Minister's supporters threw stones in return. Come out in support of his movement if he is detained. Khan, who was ousted in a parliamentary no-confidence vote last April, has since led a popular campaign against the current government, accusing it of colluding with the military to remove him from office. He has accused Pakistani authorities of attempting to arrest him to remove him from upcoming by-elections in April and a general election scheduled for October. The former leader says the charges against him are politically inspired and has warned that efforts to arrest him could lead to a risky increase in political violence in the country. He also believes that Pakistan's ruling coalition might eventually use the pretext of violence to delay the upcoming votes. In a statement, Mariam Aurangzeb, Pakistan's information minister, denied any political involvement in the case. The Islamabad High Court on Monday issued an arrest warrant against Khan over the case to have him presented before the court on March 18th. North Korea has confirmed it fired 2 missiles that it said were part of an exercise designed to train military units to carry out missions at any time and annihilate the enemy if needed. Reports on Wednesday described the launches as demonstration drills. It said the 2 surface-to-surface strategic ballistic missiles were fired close to the west coast in South Hamgyong province and flew some 611 kilometers, that's 380 miles across the country, before hitting a target on a small island off its northeastern coast. Saying that they will surely annihilate the enemy if they fight it, the commander of the unit resolved to thoroughly have the ability to fully carry out its duties of fire assault anytime by further intensifying the training of every fire assault company, reports said. On Tuesday, South Korea's military announced it had detected the North Korean launches, the newest to take place during the 11 days of joint drills between South Korea and the United States known as Freedom Shield that Pyongyang considers as a rehearsal for invasion and a proof of the 2 countries' hostility. Pyongyang has tested weaponry in recent days, including a submarine launch weapon and short-range ballistic missiles. North Korea conducted a record number of missile launches last year as it accelerated efforts to modernize its arsenal. It has also been observed making maintenances at its nuclear weapon test site, raising fears it might also be planning its first nuclear test since 2017. South Korea's military strongly condemned North Korea, calling the constant missile launches a grave incitement threatening the region's peace and security, and a U.S. State Department spokesperson criticized the launches as a violation of multiple Nation Security Council resolutions. Here are more stories. Taiwan's isolation increases as ally Honduras shifts to Beijing. Honduran President Xiomara Castro has said this country is looking to open official diplomatic ties with the People's Republic of China. The country has formal connections with Taiwan and will have to break that relationship if it decided to recognize China, which sees the self-governed island of 23 million people as its own territory with no right to state-to-state relations. China has stepped up efforts to isolate the self-ruled island diplomatically since Tsai Ing-wen was first elected president in 2016. At that time, Taiwan had formal ties with 22 states. Now that number has dropped to 14. Africa and the Caribbean, Belize, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, Paraguay, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Pacific, Marshall Islands, Nauru, Palau and Tuvalu. In African scenes, opposition party in Senegal launches protest over leader's trial. Several supporters of Senegalese opposition leader Ousmane Sonko rallied in Dakar on Tuesday, the first of many days of protest as the country gets ready for elections in less than a year. Tensions are increasing ahead of the vote in a country seen as a democratic mainstay in the region amid speculation that President Macky Sall could bypass the constitution and seek a third presidential term. The demonstration called by the Liberate the People Coalition was the first authorized by authorities in recent months. Sonko told his followers in 2024, "No one will be able to stop us from taking this country. I don't believe in Macky Sall's institutions because he himself doesn't respect them," he said, calling on his supporters to back him in big numbers at a court appearance on Thursday. On Thursday, Sonko is anticipated in court after being sued by Tourism Minister Mohamed Mbaye Niang for defamation, insult and forgery. He accuses Sonko of defaming him in relation to his management of a community agriculture program. He also faces different charges of rape and making death threats based on the complaints by an employee at a beauty salon where he was getting a massage. Sonko has denied the charges and accused authorities of trying to silence him and his party with arbitrary arrest and the instrumentalization of the justice system against opponents. Guilty verdicts could render him ineligible to stand in the presidential vote set for February 2024. And lastly, over 220 killed by record-breaking Cyclone Freddy. In Malawi, Mozambique and Madagascar, Tropical Cyclone Freddy rocked the coast of southern Africa for a second time over the weekend, bringing its total death toll to over 220 people. The month-long storm has broken at least one record and could break two more, meteorologists say. As climate change triggered warmer oceans, heat energy from the water's surface is causing stronger storms. Authorities counted 190 people dead in Malawi, with hundreds more injured and missing by Tuesday afternoon. The official death toll in neighboring Mozambique stood at 20. Many of the dead were killed by mudslides in Hilly Blantyre, Malawi's second biggest city. Heavy rain swept away thousands of homes and toppled trees, leaving residents grazing in disbelief at huge gorges in the roads and having to climb across makeshift bridges as the rain continued. Bodies were still being brought out from the devastation. The scale of the damage and loss of life is still unknown as search and rescue operations continue. Closely 60,000 people have been impacted, of which about 19,000 were displaced from their homes, Malawi's government said. Freddy developed off the coast of Australia across the whole South Indian Ocean and traveled over 8,000 kilometers, that's 4,970 miles, to make landfall in Madagascar and Mozambique in late February. It then looped back and hit the coast of Mozambique again 2 weeks later before moving inland to Malawi. The U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration said no other tropical cyclones observed in this part of the world have taken such a path across the Indian Ocean in the past 2 decades. Only 4 storms have crossed the southern Indian Ocean from east to west, with the last one in 2000, it said. Freddy holds the record for most accumulated cyclone energy, ACE, a measure based on the storm's wind strength over its lifetime of any storm in the southern hemisphere and possibly global. According to the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, the cyclone has created about as much accumulated cyclone energy as an average full North Atlantic hurricane season. As of last week, it was in the second place for the most accumulated cyclone energy of any storm since 1980, with the record held by Hurricane and Typhoon UK in 2006. Some approximations show Freddie has since broken that record with 86 ACE compared with IOK's 85 ACE. After this short break, we'll be back with more stories. Stay with us. You're welcome back. Here are stories from Nigeria. On Naira Crunch, slow compliance inspired Central Bank of Nigeria order banks ration all notes. The silence of the Central Bank of Nigeria CBN on the trillions of naira it mopped from the financial system continues to cast doubt on the possibility of achieving sufficient naira circulation in the near term after Monday night's directive urging banks to comply with the Supreme Court ruling extending the validity of the old banknote to December 31st, 2023. The statement came days after some banks had started issuing the old notes in their vaults. Some of the banks, learned that had exhausted their residual notes in their possession before the CBN directive, a reason majority have known to give as at yesterday when the regulatory directive took effect. Insider sources disclosed that some bank chiefs used the Supreme Court ruling to release the stranded cash in their possession while they rejected deposits of same old notes. It was informed that bank chiefs were already worried about what to do with the notes they collected at the height of the crisis without a clear directive from the regulator. After the Supreme Court judgment reports that CBN was still in possession of a reasonable volume of the old notes but will require sufficient time to sort it for distribution for onward reissuance. The latest official statement of the Apex Bank on the issue vaguely said that all notes remain legal tenders alongside the new series. There was nothing in the statement that indicated how the bank intends to plug the hole to bring the situation to normalcy. The CBN spokesperson, Dr. Isa Abdulmumin, was not forthcoming on the returned old notes and whether they will be reissued in the meantime, as calls and messages were not attended as at press time. Commercial banks, who have also been jolted by the recent bank failure in the United States, are mindful of a possible run on the banks as soon as substantial cash flows into the system. The lenders, it was learned, are simulating different levels of scenarios of cash calls and strategizing on how they could be prevented. INEC cautions politicians, go by election not war, shun violence. Ahead of Saturday's governorship and state assembly elections, the federal government has warned partisans against resorting to violence in the bid to obtain political power. National Security Advisor NSA General Mohammed Muguno, retired, gave the warning on Tuesday in Abuja at a meeting of the Interagency Consultative Meeting on Election Security, ICCES. Speaking earlier, Chairman Independent National Electoral Commission INEC Professor Mahmoud Yakubu said the Commission's state offices have been made available to the Nigeria Police Force, being the lead agency. He said that the delimitation details for both the governorship and state assembly elections, including locations of polling units and collation centers, have been made available to the police. Yakubu said it was important for parties and candidates to speak to their agents and supporters to see the elections as a contest and not war. And finally, on the news presidential polls, federal government says we successfully blocked over 12 million cyber attacks. On Tuesday, the federal government said a total of 12 million cyber attacks were recorded from both within and outside Nigeria during the presidential and National Assembly polls. However, the federal government said it successfully blocked these attacks and sent them to the relevant institutions for appropriate action. This was contained in a statement made available by the spokesperson to the Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, Uwa Suleiman. Parastatals under the supervision of the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy played a vital role in providing the enabling environment for the successful conduct of a credible, free, fair and transparent election, according to the statement. Professor Isa Ali Ibrahim Bantami, Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, had on the eve of the Presidential and National Assembly elections set up a ministerial standing committee on advisory role for the protection of Nigerian cyberspace and ICT infrastructure to guarantee a safe and secure cyberspace for Nigerians before, during and after the 2023 presidential elections. In the run-up to the 2023 general polls, threat intelligence showed an astronomical addition in cyber threats to Nigerian cyberspace, according to the statement. Generally, threats to public websites and portals average around 1,550,000 daily. However, they skyrocketed to 6,997,277 on presidential election day. It's to reveal that in line with its mandate of securing the Nigerian cyberspace, the parastatals, under the supervision of the ministry, established cybersecurity centers, namely the National Information Technology NITDAS, Computer Emergency Readiness and Response Team SART, the Nigerian Communications Commission NCC's Computer Security Incident Response Team CSART, and Galaxy Backbone GBP Security Operations Center SOC. It noted that the centers were established between 2020 and 2022 in line with the minister's policy directives and have been monitoring Nigeria's cyberspace for potential threats and taking appropriate actions to mitigate them, both individually and collectively, as well as in collaboration with other stakeholders. A recap of major stories. United Kingdom budget. Today, British Prime Minister looks to save the economy and his seat. Hundreds of thousands in Duluth, California to evacuate. Monastery assault in Myanmar kills 22. Pakistani police fired tear gas into former Prime Minister's home, and North Korea confirms 2 missile launches, says drills designed to annihilate enemy. Remember, be brave to stand for what you believe in, even if you stand alone. According to Roy T. Bennett, I remain Lois Turaki. Enjoy your day.